Y'all, we are back. Hello, hello. I cannot believe we made it here, day 3 of the BWP Summit, and we're on our last guest speaker. It's so crazy. We have Joy Malone here with us, but before we hop into it, I just want to shout out our sponsors one more time. Um, Firstly, let's shout out Adobe, who is sponsoring not only this event, but a free giveaway. We've been telling y'all about this giveaway all weekend because it's incredible. Firstly, you could win the full Adobe Creative Cloud suite, which is like a $636 value. You have access to all of the apps, which is so good, especially if you don't only do photography, but maybe you're into podcasting or designing or illustrating. Like you can have all the apps you need for free because of Adobe. Or you can also win the photographer plan, which is just Lightroom and Photoshop, which is still absolutely invaluable. I mean, all of us need that here. We all use Adobe products. So thank you so much to Adobe. And then, of course, thank you to Getty Images, who has sponsored not only this event, but our 50 portfolio reviews we've done already. And they're sponsoring more for us. So make sure you're in the collective so that you can get these notifications about when we're doing these portfolio reviews, because that too is completely invaluable. It's done so much for the community already. But let's hop right in. Like I said, Joy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
I'm
thank
so
you
happy to
for
talk to you.
having me. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you to the sponsors. Thank you, Polly, for just creating this space. It's so special. And Chrissy, you've been doing a phenomenal job because I've been tuning in and just really honored to be here.
Thank you, thank you. And you look amazing. I love these colors. I mean, I know you're inside, but it feels like you're in nature. So like I'm just loving the vibe right now.
Aw,
This
thank
is
you.
crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So for the folks in the chat who might not know you, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into photography.
Okay, so my name is Joy Malone. I'm from New Rochelle, New York. Um, I've been doing photography my entire life. My favorite toy when I was a little kid was a Fisher Price camera that didn't even take pictures.
Ah, that's so cool.
Um, yeah, like I grew up with our family having really large photo albums in our living room, so I spent a lot of time looking through those. And I think I've just always either loved taking pictures or looking at them.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't until I was in college as an undergrad that I realized, like, oh, I can make photography my career. And so it was when I had already experimented with a bunch of majors. And at the time that I really fell in love with photography, I was a philosophy major and I had to take a photo, I had to take an art elective. And I wound up taking photography and just really fell head over heels in love with it. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I made it my minor. And from there, I think I've just always made it a point to try to make money exclusively as a photographer. So I worked at a 1 hour photo store. I did real estate photography, infant photography, just any type of photography. If a company was hiring or if someone inquired with me, I was like, I'm there. This is what I do. And just slowly over the years have built a career out of shooting a little bit of everything.
Joy, you are me and I am you. This is so crazy that you say that because literally I put the pieces together going backwards actually, but
Hmm.
I was also the kid that loved family photo albums. Like they didn't even have to be mine. Like I go to my friend's house and I'm like, "Can I see your family photo album?" Like
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they're fascinating. Like these people who aren't photographers are actual storytellers in our families. Like because the photos always look perfect. They're amazing. Our heads were cut off like right here, but they're still like perfect photos.
yeah,
And then similarly, when I went to college, I also was like, oh, I think I can do this for real. And I
yeah.
loved philosophy class. Like that was my favorite class. So it's kind of crazy that you just like read my whole life to me like that.
Yeah, birds of a feather. And what's funny is when I went for my MFA, I was really kind of afraid because I wasn't a photography or art major. But it turns out philosophy is one of the, I guess, best majors to go into an MFA art program with.
Oh,
If it's
really?
not officially art. So
Why
yeah,
is
it
that?
worked
What
out.
do you think?
I think maybe because philosophy kind of forces you to be a critical thinker, forces you to kind of sit down and see the world
Mm,
differently, see past the mundane. And I think that's the essence of a good photographer, is someone who sees past, I guess, the superficial and just takes a moment to try to, I guess, see the beauty in everything and compose that winning shot.
that makes so much sense. Which, speaking of school, I know that you're also a professor of photography, which
Yes.
is so amazing. Can you tell us, like, what part of your journey was that? Like, was that when you
Okay.
did your MFA, or like, how did that happen?
So, same way I've always been a photographer, I think I've always been a teacher. Anything I learn, I can kind of disseminate to other people. And so I started out, my mother was a camp director. And so I grew up in camp. And I was always kind of like, if I knew double Dutch, I took it upon myself to teach my whole unit double Dutch. And so when I did finally realize I love photography, I started learning in the dark room with film. And I went to my mom and I was like, can I build a dark room in camp and offer photography as a program to the students? And I was still a college student at the time. So I was in dialogue with my professor and just letting her know, like, oh, I'm building this dark room at this location. What do you suggest? And between her guidance, between B&H, their guidance, I built a dark room and I wound up teaching photography to Girl Scouts for a few years, and then later on taught it to children from the Boys and Girls Club, or it
Wow.
might have been the Y, but regardless, wound up teaching a bunch of children. Then, fast forward years later, after I did my MFA, I reached out to this professor just to say thank you. I finished my MFA. You were such an inspiration in my life. And she was like, what did you shoot? What was your thesis on? And I showed her, it was my nighttime landscape photography. She was like,
Mm.
can you come in and show some of your photos to my class? And can you explain to them how you shoot at night? And so I was like, sure. And when I went in, I did like a little presentation and explained to them about tripods and remote shutters. And after that demonstration, she's like, by the way, we have spillover next semester. Would you like your own class? So, unbeknownst to me, like that was my interview. But it was kind of like the final interview because even as a student at St. John's, while I was like bouncing around from major to major, when I finally found photography, like the passion that I had for it, I was automatically an A student. Like I didn't miss class. I showed up in a great mood. I went above and beyond. And so she remembered that student. Now I'm back presenting work. And so, like I said, without even knowing it, like that had been my interview process.
I feel like that was the universe just aligning for you, because what a dream. Like, that's so cool.
It was. It was because I was like, I knew that I was doing my MFA with the hopes that, well, for two reasons. A, I wanted to elevate my photography.
Yeah.
And B, yeah, I was like, well, if worse comes to worse, I can teach, I can be a professor, but I really didn't have an idea how I was going to make that happen. And so, yeah, I really do feel blessed because it was like I graduated in 2010 and started teaching like that September.
That's so
And
beautiful.
11 years now.
So boom, you jump right into a career, and a career that you're passionate about. I know you have children. Can you let us know what part of that journey your children came in?
All overlaps. So, um, when I was finishing up at St. John's, and like I said, I was a photography minor, and I shot mostly film. I didn't really have experience with color or digital, but I knew I'm like, I'm going to be a photographer, only going to make money shooting. And so, straight out of undergrad, I worked for a real estate company and I worked for a school photo company. And while the money was decent, and yes, I was learning new skills, I wasn't happy with
Right.
that. And so, while working with the real estate company, I found out I was pregnant with my first daughter,
Oh.
and lost that job. Oh my gosh, that was like one of the low moments. I was so upset about it. But my family really rallied around me and let me know, like, you're safe, you're good, like, focus on being a mom. And so that support was beautiful. And I was like, okay, what can I do at this time? Since I obviously am not going to be working, I'm going to have this new infant that I'm going to devote myself to. And I found an MFA program online. So Academy of Art University in San Francisco. Um, I applied to them, they accepted me, and I had my daughter in July, and that September, I started in their MFA program for fine art photography. It
Wow.
was much more difficult than I had anticipated,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, like I just started to I basically learned that, just have her on me and do my work, get ahead of the work. Um, I lucked out. She was an easy child. She would sleep through the night. And so I would put her to sleep. I would give my mom or my sister the what is that little thing? The monitor. And then I would go shooting at night. And my daytime would be filled with my daughter and, raising her, playing with her. And then like every free moment I had, I would be working on my MFA. And I graduated right before she started kindergarten. And so it was like that year, both of us, were out of the because I didn't send her to preschool. And so when she started kindergarten, that's when I started as a professor and then also as an infant photographer.
So then it got a little easier just in terms of like balancing um, mothering and then going to do your own work.
Yeah, I definitely will say she was an easy child, and my support team was just phenomenal. And so yeah, for the first few years of teaching, she was in school, and St. John's has really been a godsend to me in that when they saw, like, okay, you're trying to balance picking your daughter up from school, things like that, they, instead of giving me two classes, well, like basically having one class where you teach twice a week, they give me one long class once a week. And
Oh,
then
no.
yeah, so that was cool. And then because I did my MFA online, they also pushed me to develop an online photography class. And so
Mm.
before COVID even happened, I was teaching one class in person, one class online.
Ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Before COVID too, I took some online college courses. So shout out to you.
Yeah. Not that easy, but it's
Right.
convenient.
Right, right, right. When you were taking those night shots, you were doing night landscape and street photography?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then was that also what you ended up teaching when you started your teaching courses?
So my thesis was all nighttime landscape, and I wound up shooting like suburbia, my neighborhood, which was kind of ironic because I've really found like the least inspiration in my familiar surroundings, and I really wanted to just go to the city all the time and shoot at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, wound up shooting nighttime landscape there. But with my class, it's intro to photo for non-photography majors. And so my in-person class, every student has a computer and a printer. And so my in-person class is very heavy on printing and editing, and we do a lot of Adobe. Shout out to Adobe. Yeah, I teach them Photoshop, I teach them Lightroom, and we're printing a lot. Whereas my online class, we don't print at all, and it's more about practice, working through the different settings of the camera. There's tons of I try to break down the different genres of photography. So when we're In photojournalism, we're talking about Gordon Parks, Dorothea Lange. But then when we're in fine art photography, we're talking about Gregory Crewdson and like names are escaping me right now, Shima Meadows. But I
But the
go
one,
in, yeah, I go into like what are the genres, who are the people doing the work. We talk about Carrie Mae Weems and you know, kind of profile the photographers, go into the history of like what is a camera? What is photography even? Um and it's just I try to give them just a huge introduction to I feel like I'm an ambassador to photography,
yeah.
and
Really,
yeah,
you need to
just
put that in your bio if that's not already there, because that's a bar. I'm wondering, we have a lot of self-taught photographers in the community. Do you feel like it's ever too late to take a class?
no, not at all. I feel like um so like when I was feeling like unsatisfied with my work directly after graduating from undergrad, if it wasn't for doing my MFA, I don't think I would have learned lighting, Photoshop, business of photography in the ways that I did. Um, we had to take these history of photography classes and then these contemporary art photo classes, and it was just engaging. There might have even been some philosophy classes in there. But it was just engaging with photography with these professors who were in their own right creating amazing work and out in the world. And there were just there's something that practicing photography in real life gives you versus academia, which is more theoretical. But there is also a lot to be said by having a professor over you, guiding your work, giving you feedback in real time, and just
Yeah.
holding your hand as you try to figure out these programs and camera settings and
Yeah.
also the network.
It was like the first portfolio review I got. That's real.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really curious, like, especially considering this is all happening around the same time for you. You yourself being a student, becoming a teacher, becoming a mother. Do you feel like there are any similarities to how you teach and how you mother?
Yeah, actually, I think I lead with love,
Mm,
understanding that like these are new concepts to both my like life is new to my kids, photography is new to my students. I try to assume the best about everyone's intentions and not think the worst about if a mistake is made or whatever. Um, but yeah, I just try to like foster a love of learning. I'm not a big test giver um, because I'm repetitive with some of the lessons because I recognize like the first time you hear something, it might not fully sink in. Like you're slightly familiar with it, and so like I make sure I'm repetitive, especially with like manual camera settings, things like that. And even with my children, I try to recognize like when they do something wrong, I'm like, is this the first time they're doing this? They genuinely didn't know better.
yeah,
Giving them grace, um, and then also just recognizing that like I don't know everything. Like when I first started teaching and even with being a mom, it's like there's this feeling like I have to be perfect, I have to get this right, but it's just like no, I get to give myself grace and I'm not perfect, but I am willing to learn, I'm willing to reflect, and I'm willing to do additional research if necessary and come back and address the situation on the back end.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to shout out to the chat really quickly because we got some love in here for you. For one, that says Simone says that's a beautiful story. Regina says my dad gave me all the family photo albums. I'm excited to go through them and add to it. Which what a gem! I love that for you. I am not in possession of all of my family photo albums, but when I was like 15, I was just ahead of my time. I scanned so many of them because for some reason I just knew my
That's
mom wasn't gonna
smart.
let me have them. So I scanned a bunch, just like some of my favorites, and just put them on a flash drive that I still have to this day. And now for some reason they think I have all of them, and I'm like, no, but I will get it. So
Yeah, yeah, like I'll do it eventually. But that's smart because but like paper photographs, digital photographs, like they can be lost. And
anything.
so it is smart to back them up in, whether it's scanning or whatever. But yeah, you should have backups because they're priceless.
I didn't know how important it was when I did it at the time. I was more so like, well, I want these photos and I want
Yeah,
to put them on, like MySpace and Facebook. But I'm so glad, like today, I'm so glad that I thought to do that. And then Kanaya says, "Oh my God, the photo albums! I never thought about it like that. What a dope perspective." And B Lynn says, "My dad was the photographer in our family, and I have his old photo albums too, along with the vintage Yashica A camera. Oh
those
my
cameras
God,
are
I'm
the
so
best,
jealous."
the old cameras.
Yes, I've talked to a couple people this weekend, and they were like, "Oh, like my dad or my grandpa or somebody gave them their old cameras," and I'm just like, "Oh my God, what a blessing! That's so amazing." Um,
Yeah,
and then in terms of the photography classes, V Lynn also says that I've taken photography classes at local community colleges, and it was so very helpful.
yeah,
So I will say, especially for folks who maybe like a decade out of college at this point or more, where it's like it's not too late, like Joy said, and a local a local community college is a really great alternative. And then there's online classes that we can take too. So just be on the lookout around you. And I also want
yeah.
to shout out Magrika, who says, I went to a tech school for the art and tech aspect of photography, but currently wondering if going back to school for the business finance aspects of the industry is worth it. Do you think it would be worth it? If so, which route would you recommend?
That's interesting. It's hard to say. Um, because there are a lot of people that I know who went for their MFA, they take on that debt and then they have a hard time finding a job. Um, I would say if you genuinely have a love and a yearning for this knowledge, you know, it could be LinkedIn learning. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on degree that you take on. Um, what else? Like Canopy starts with a K, Kanopy. It's like a Netflix for educational films. And if you have a library card, you have access to Canopy for free. And there's tons of documentaries on photographers' lives, as well as learning like they have like intro to photo digital photography 101, like they've got actual photo classes video form on Canopy. And then also like Adobe has tons of tutorials directly on their website. So there are ways that you can access this information that doesn't take on like saddling on the debt of a full degree program. Also, and it's funny, like throughout my years of just being out in the world and shooting, like I've met other photographers and like two photographers I know, like they did not go to school and they're legendary. So you don't necessarily have to go to school for it. You can just be in practice with it.
Yeah. Shout out to the team because they dropped some other resources in there like canopy.com and LinkedIn Learning. So if you don't have the access or the time that you think it would take to go to college or go back to college to do that, there's plenty of online resources you can do. So thank you so much for that, Joy. And I also want to shout out your mama in the chat. Oh my
Yes.
God.
I love my mom. She's so funny. The other day we were talking about, she's like, girl, I registered for this. I was like, you registered? I had no
I
clue.
love that so much. When I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, yes, Miss Malone. So, speaking of that, we are so honored to have mothers in the chat, including yourself, Joy. Um, Women in general have so much to hold.
Yeah.
And it's bittersweet. It's a blessing that we can hold so many of these things. But I want to talk about some tangible steps that you specifically have taken in this process of like how we can hold, considering going back to school, being teachers in our own way, whether we're actual professors or not. Maybe we're just guides for the people in our community, for our own children. How do we balance all of these things? How did you balance all of these things, and what did that look like for you?
So first of all, it's hard. There are moments where I feel like I am failing at everything, or I'm like, I have an edit due, or I need to do grades, and I just feel interrupted. Like I can't sit and get things done. But um, I don't, you figure it out. Like you take it day by day. Um, and, there are times where I might have my oldest sit with my youngest, and I'm like, can you two, hang out? Or my mom will take them, or my sister will take them. My oldest is going to be 17 this summer. So she's really less of, you know, an issue because teens by nature, they're kind of like aloof and, but my 8-year-old, you know, I'm very lucky. Their father, like he'll spend time with them, and then when everyone has them, that's when I'll kind of go off alone and I'm editing or grading, whatever. I will say, as far as shooting's concerned, it's taken years of trial and error, I think, to figure out like my best flow. Like right now I feel like I'm in my sweet spot because when I first started out, I was charging too low. And so I had tons of work and not that much money.
That's
Then then I started to, just as the years go on, you kind of get an idea of like you raise your prices and, figure out where you fit in. But I'd say I've learned along the years, like I don't necessarily want to be busy all the time.
yeah,
I enjoy downtime. And so I found a nice flow where maybe I shoot once to 3 times a week. Some weeks I'm very busy, but
yeah,
then there's some periods like my career naturally, like the summertime, I have breaks, and that's really nice. I used to fret about that. Now I embrace it and I'm just like, okay, breathe and enjoy this time with your girls. Use this time to maybe take a weekend with them. Um but yeah, it's just really about like scheduling things in my calendar and prioritizing, I guess, what I feel like prioritizing. Like I put my daughters first, my family first. And then from there, my shooting schedule, it really is all over the place. There will be days where I wake up thinking I've got nothing to do, and someone will call, like, can you be here tonight by 6 o'clock? And I'm just like, okay, we
right.
can get there. Um, But and then sometimes the answer is no to that as well. It's just kind of taking it day by day and honoring the commitments that I have.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because how do you know when to push through and when to go and say no and just be like, actually I can't do it. I have too much on my plate or I need to relax.
It's kind of following your gut. I tended to say yes for a while to everything. And then I found like, oh, my sleep pattern's interrupted. I'm not going to bed till 4 a.m. regularly. Like that's not healthy. And so I definitely just kind of had to reevaluate and just take stock on like how do I feel? How do I feel about like I homeschool my children. So, how do I feel about them? Because my 8-year-old, like she still gets into bed with me at night, she still likes and desires to be around her mom. And so I've got to prioritize her feelings as well. And it really is a balancing act. It's not easy at all,
Joy,
but it's
you
going my
homeschool.
way.
You teach at school. You have your own business as your personal photographer, like your personal photography. You're a mother, you're a wife. Like, how do you do this? How do you do this? I'm trying to manage myself, and some days I'm flustered. Like, how truly, like, how do you do all of this?
I I really honestly, like I said, it's just day by day. Like I go through each moment and I'm not married actually, but me and their
Um,
father, like we co-parent really well. He's like my best friend from childhood. And so I'm lucky first and foremost with my family and my support system because when I have to shoot, I know for a fact my girls are okay. You know, they're with my sister, they're with my mom, they're with their father. Um and yeah, I stay up late a lot, you know, because it's like I do want to give them that time. But there are things that definitely get like for example, there was like 2 or 3 months where I literally ordered out every day.
mhm.
You know, like I don't have time to cook and clean the kitchen and do all of this stuff. And so even with that, like I had to pause for a second, like, okay, you're feeding yourself and your children junk. And even though it's convenient in the moment, what is this doing to you long term? And so I had to kind of like sit with that for a moment. Like, okay, the next time you get some time, you need to figure out, like, how can I cook more? What are bringing them in? Because I'm homeschooling them. Like, y'all can learn how to cook and help
Right.
assist me here. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of like constantly doing the best I can in the moment to make sure that everything is getting done, but then also reevaluating and being honest with myself, reflecting on like, okay, how did you get through this week? What could you have done better? What can you do for yourself to, make sure that diet is better moving forward, or more time is spent, with my 8-year-old per se, my oldest. I mean, I spend a lot of time with her too, but like I said, teens are more aloof. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, just kind of trying to find that balance where I'm happy with how much time I'm spending with both of them because they do come first.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
such
not.
a good point. I also want to jump into the chat really quick. Helen said they took a studio photography class and black and white film development class, and it was so much fun. So we got folks in here that are going back and taking classes where they see fit, and I love, love that. Especially that we have a professor in front of us, y'all. We have to make sure we continue our education. And then we have Kanaya that says the price is the hardest part. So you spoke about this just a little bit earlier. Um,
Yeah.
Kanaya said, what I have come to realize is for every hour we shoot, there is 2 hours in editing. So we can't cut ourselves short on the price. And that's so, so important. Like when we think about how we're managing our time, and maybe not all of us are mothers, but we have other relationships we do have to contribute to in other parts of our life. We need to make sure there's balance. And so we need to make sure that we're making, like, we get paid enough.
Yes.
So when we're talking about our price, and let's just say like, oh, you say 500 for the shoot, are you considering how many hours you're also editing? Because it's not just the hours you're contributing on that set. So that's really important. And thank you for shouting that out, Kanaya. And then we also have a quick question I want to shout out that says, how and when do you decide to put your watermark on photos? Because I see the set you have here. Was this the same set that you used for your Mother's Day takeover for the BWP?
Yes.
Oh my God,
Yes.
tell us.
So, um, in 2020, I signed a freelance contract with Reuters, and last year I signed a two contracts with Getty Entertainment. And so, yeah, that honestly, both dreams come true. And just, yeah, I'm really so happy that I'm still pinching myself that those things came to fruition. But
Amazing. Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. And so, like, with the images that Reuters publishes and that Getty publishes, they do ask that I only post them with their watermarks on them. And so
Okay.
with those images, once they go to the wire through Reuters, or once Getty accepts them into their editorial feed, then those images will appear with their watermarks. And then I try to watermark my own images um, that aren't necessarily accepted to Reuters or Getty with my own name on the bottom in the same fashion, like a semi opaque white, small, bright, alignment, bottom right corner, just because I want people to reach out to me if they want to license the photo, or in most cases, they'll just kind of take the image and use it. But at least it's a low res image and my name travels with it.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
I absolutely loved that takeover, and I love this photo. I knew it looked familiar. I think this one is absolutely so gorgeous. I want to also shout out Kanai again because they said sometimes I put my name in the metadata. That way
Yes.
is in the photo and not on it. And in fact, I would even encourage y'all to do it all the time.
Mhm.
Using Lightroom, you can create a preset where it fills in your name, where you're based, your contact information,
Yeah.
and then you can adjust based on projects. So, for example, you do something for Getty Entertainment, you can put in there that you did it for Getty Entertainment, and then put their watermark on it as they would have you. So, thank you for calling that out, Kanai. That's a really good point. Also, Simone and V-Lynn shout out that like saying no is okay and it's a complete sentence. If you don't feel like
Absolutely.
you're in alignment with a project or a client, you can say no, or a price. Say no, this is not in alignment with who I am or where I'm at right now or what I need. So that is always important. Thank y'all for shouting that out. But back to this photo. I love it so much. This is so gorgeous. I personally really love like photojournalistic or documentary stories about motherhood and motherhood photography. Can you tell us about the approach you take, especially like how it differs from maybe like how you would approach your night photography?
Absolutely. So, like I was saying, Reuters, total dream come true. And after my initial jobs with them, um, my editor said to me one day, she's like, "What do you want to shoot?" And like I'm kind of in that space again now. I'm like, what do I want to shoot? And so I started to pitch her different ideas. She doesn't always accept every pitch, but I was like, Black maternal health was one of the pitches, and she's like, absolutely, you may shoot that. And so it was my first investigative journalism piece for Reuters, and I kind of just put out like I'm shooting Black moms free, here it is right here, free birth photo sessions. I sent this out to doula networks.
Mm.
I shared it obviously here on Instagram. I emailed it to people, anybody who I could think of that I felt this pertained to, and people shared it, and moms reached out to me. And so I explained to them, like, I'm doing this piece for Reuters. These images have the possibility of going out to the world. I need you to sign some press releases. And basically, to keep the integrity of the photos, I'm not allowed to set anything up. This is not like a commercial shoot, like
Mhm.
Martine was saying, where everything is planned. I tell the moms, like, I'm coming in, I'm a fly on the wall, and I'm just shooting you in your element. I'm not telling, like, oh, let's turn on this light for better lighting, whatever. I'll ask them, like, if my flash is okay, if it's a dark setting or whatever. But I actually, Reuters prefers not to use flash, so only if necessary. They prefer natural lighting. And with all of these different shoots, I went and just kind of like followed these moms, whether they were pregnant, whether they had their newborn at home, or this mom is attempting a home birth. She did wind up going to the hospital to give birth. But I was there through her labor and just documenting her home birth. And yeah, that was
It's so
basically.
beautiful. And I love that you mentioned that. I feel like we've been talking about being on set a lot all weekend. And the majority of the time we've been talking about that it's a full crew and this is how it's set up and like that's the goal people want to get to. But there are projects like this where it's like you just want to be a fly on the wall. You just want to capture people as they are.
Mm.
So thank you for explaining what that looks like. And also with that, we've been talking a lot about putting ourselves out there. And no one else has mentioned that, like, sometimes you do have to do these personal call outs. And I love that you said that, like, you went to businesses, you went to other, like, actual mothers and just said, hey, I'm looking for these people if you're open. And so that can look like that for commissioned work or for test work that you want to do. And it is about sometimes calling out a crew, or you're calling out your subjects to
Yeah,
come to you. So that's invaluable. Thank you so much.
no
Um,
problem.
yeah, and then so I was also thinking, like, we have so much of these resources are about, like, being in alignment with yourself, have, like, giving yourself grace, being true to yourself while you're working, when you're in your own spaces. Can you talk more about, like, what giving yourself grace actually looks like? Especially when I think about being a mother, looking at images like this, like, you're giving yourself grace when you're mothering and when you're giving yourself grace on set.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of trying to tell that story, but also honor the mother. And so with that type of shoot, I asked them, "Are you okay with me photographing you nude? If not, I will, change my angle, um if you are okay with it." But I also explained to them, like, with the nature of these photos, that I was going to share them with them, and that they could say, remove these or whatever. And that's not normally the way a project like this would work. You don't really allow the subject to edit their photos, but because of how private the subject matter was, I did allow the moms to see and kind of say, "Oh, I don't like that angle," or "I don't like this."
Wow.
But yeah, I talk to them ahead of time and find out, like, even, like, bringing a newborn home, you might not have done your laundry or washed the dishes. And I would ask them, like, "Are you okay with me getting the clutter in the background? Or would you prefer that I don't really show that?" And so just finding that, just respecting my subjects, and letting them know exactly what it is I'm shooting, and that I'm approaching this from a place of, like, they're beautiful, their story is beautiful, and I want to show the reality of Black motherhood.
Can we get more into Black motherhood? Like, can you tell us about a difficult moment that you had when you're trying to balance all these different things, and how you got out of it?
So I think one of the things I talked to you about was, as a professor, there was a semester when my second daughter was born, when I wasn't really able to keep up with having a newborn and the workload. And I wasn't invited back to teach that following semester. And what that looked like, though, like, in the moment, I was very kind of, like, sad about it. But that giving grace, I don't pressure people. I don't push. I kind of, like, lay back, and I'll refocus my energy into other things. And so I kind of took that as, like, okay, well, it is hard having a newborn. It is hard balancing, because I was still shooting on top of teaching. And at that point, I was writing the online course. And so I had to really take stock in, like, okay, you really didn't meet these demands in the way you were supposed to.
Yeah.
And I can't be upset with anyone, not even myself, because I'm human. And, sometimes you take on more than you can handle. It was one of those, like, lessons also at that point, and I laugh with people. I learned a valuable lesson about communicating with my clients, because once I had my daughter, I was just like, I'm just not responding to anyone. I'm focusing on my infant, and just everyone got the silent treatment. And in that time, they all found a different photographer to use. And
Mm.
so when I was ready to come back to work, it was just kind of like they're working with other people. And so I would say that it hasn't been all perfect. I haven't had all the answers from day one. There's
Right.
definitely been, like, moments that I've handled it perfectly. There's definitely been moments where I dropped the ball, but I think my overall, like, people know who you are, they know your personality. And so, for example, St. John's knows from me as a student, from my years as a professor prior to having my second daughter, that I'm a hard worker, that I bring a certain level of professionalism to the class. And so I reached back out to them, um, when my around the time my second daughter turned 1, and I'm like, I would love to teach again, and they welcomed me back with open arms. And so there's definitely been moments where maybe I haven't done the right thing by photography or my business, um, but it all comes back around like full circle, and like those same clients that I kind of let fall by the wayside, I reach back out to them, let them know I'm still shooting, even with social media posting, things like that. And then I realized that, like, you just have to be transparent and honest, and like a simple email of, hey, you all, just had a baby, taking 6-month break, like it would have taken all of 2 seconds to send that email, as opposed to just going radio silent. And so I've learned that transparency is the key, because these are real relationships that you're growing, hopefully. And, you just have to communicate. The same thing I tell my students, if they're going to be absent, like, don't just be absent and not tell me, come talk to me. Let me know what you're going through. And so, as a photographer, that relationship with the clients, like, let your clients know what you're going through. They'll give you grace, but you've got to speak.
Being human is so funny in that way
Yeah.
because we are so afraid of being vulnerable and being rejected. And I think it's like both sides of that, where we're like, no is a complete sentence, that
Mm-hmm.
we think that when people tell us no, it's like the rejection forever, where it's
Yeah,
like,
and it's not.
and it's not in that way that they accepted you back in, where they were like, it looks like you need a break. So this no is really for the moment. It's like you, excuse me, the reality is you have too much to deal with. You need to readjust, you need to modify. And then once you get acclimated, come back.
Come
Yes,
back.
we want you to shoot with us still. So I'm so glad that like you have such a big testament that, I mean, I'm sure at the time it felt
Oh, it's devastated.
falling apart, probably, right? Like, like you're
Yeah.
devastated, you're like in the middle of it, you're like, oh no, do they never want to shoot with me again? But that's just our humanness. That's our brain seeing a rejection as a forever rejection, which is not true. It's never the
Not
case.
true at all. And I even feel like that about Reuters and Getty. They were on my radar for years, and I couldn't figure out how to get in with either of them. And when
Mm,
I kind of like released it, Reuters happened. And I was, like I said, I'm still just like, that's a dream come true. And, but it wasn't on my schedule. It was when it was meant to be that it happened.
yeah. So when I'm thinking about this, like how we sometimes have to put a break on our relationships, and sometimes need to like pursue relationships, like how do you manage that, especially with like such a personal project that you were mentioning about, the motherhood project? Like, how do you keep in touch with them? How do you know when to keep in touch with people to keep these relationships, even if there might be a pause in them?
Um, Definitely, like I said, learning from those past mistakes and realizing that it's back and forth, and just to be honest and be transparent. I don't try to inundate people with things. I very much kind of like fall back. Like, I'll plant the seed, but then I kind of lay back because I have enough on my plate already to handle, that I'm like, distract yourself with your children, distract yourself with cooking a meal, distract yourself with grading. Just, I'll reach out, and then I will busy myself with other things. And I am constantly busy. I have more than enough things to do. And yeah, I'm just very honest. That
That's
way I don't have to keep up a facade or anything like that.
And that's like one of the big things. I read like some self-help or like healing type of books, and that's one of the biggest things they say in like all of them is if you make your needs known, you can receive them. So if
Mm-hmm.
you need help, if you need a break, the folks around you, you think they might reject you, but they are going to help you get the thing that you need.
Absolutely.
Very good point. I'm so glad we come back around to just giving ourselves the love that we need, and that means speaking up. um
Absolutely. Yeah, asking for what we want. Um and just looking at the work that we want to create and trying to point ourselves in that direction. I went from, because I like I say, I shoot everything, right? And somewhere before 2020, I told myself I want to be published and I would like to shoot with Getty and Reuters. And um it took years for those things to come to fruition, but being honest with myself, pointing myself in that direction, doing research on the companies, um allowed me to create work that caught the editor's eyes, that, brought me into their folds.
Yeah, I love that. So, if anybody in the audience is like, how do I become a contributor to these people? I mean, one, in part, is like taking steps like Joy did to like say, okay, hey, these are actually the people I need. It can't be like too broad. It's like, this is who I want to go for. What
Mhm.
other steps can they take to make sure that they have these people not only in their awareness, but they get in their inboxes and they can become a contributor?
So, with Reuters, it kind of was like when COVID happened, it happened in New Rochelle, where I live, first on the East Coast. And so all of these different organizations, Dr. Oz, all these talk shows wanted to talk to moms from New Rochelle to learn about what it was like to be in this first lockdown zone.
Mm,
When I saw that one of the journalists that wanted to talk to us was from Reuters, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take that interview." And so I contacted him, I did his interview, and then at the end, I plugged myself. And I was just like, "By the way, I'm a photographer. I've been interested in Reuters for years. Can you put me in contact with someone in the photo department? Like, how does that work?" And he was like, "Sure, I'll put you in contact." And to be honest, I was kind of like, all right, whatever. People tell you yes, and then nothing comes from it. But literally the next day, my editor, she's in charge of the North American news desk, called me. And she's like, we'd be interested in having you capture your own family life. Um, During the pandemic. And one of my images from that became one of the most important pictures in 2020 for Reuters. It won awards. It was on the cover of the New York Times and the Guardian. And it was literally shot right in my house. It's just a matter of, like I said, I wanted Reuters for so long. Then when I had this opportunity to do the interview, I shot my shot during that. And that's what connected me in with them.
come on. We're speaking up for ourselves. 2023 and beyond. We're speaking up for ourselves.
Yeah.
What we need.
Yeah.
I have a question in this chat for you from Simone, who is a self-taught photographer using a Nikon. And they say they got very attached to this type of camera, but is getting encouraged by everybody that they need to upgrade. Would you recommend buying more updated cameras to keep up with the industry, or what's your thought?
I'm literally in the same boat as you right now. I shoot with two Canon 6Ds,
Okay.
and everybody's like, upgrade. You need to upgrade to mirrorless. And I think this summer, while I have a bit of downtime, I am going to experiment with some cameras and see which one I feel like suits me. But it depends who you speak to. There are some people that are just like, you must upgrade, newest, best, everything. And then there are other people that are like, shoot with what works for you. The 6Ds have been, I know how to, like, they've been faithful to me. They, work well for me. I know how to do their settings. Because I was literally looking at someone the other day who said, I think they brought like the R5. and they
Yeah,
were having a problem with focusing. And this is someone who is a professional photographer, but maybe for a few jobs, her focus might be off. And I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm in the same boat as you, I am an advocate of like upgrading your gear, of course. But I also believe that like you can get a beautiful image with your cell phone camera. Obviously, that's not ideal, but the camera doesn't really make the photograph the way the photographer does.
that part. Yes. And I also want to shout out some love for you. Mari Images says, thank you for describing the process for creating these images. This is exactly what I want to do. Create images of us in our natural element. No props, just me and my camera. And I love that because I don't know. I feel like sometimes maybe we see certain niches get highlighted a lot more, and we don't think that these other things are possible. But then we have people like you, Joy, here that are like, no, I make a living this way. This is a part of my lifestyle, and these are things that I love to do. So I'm really grateful that like people can see you, witness you, and like find encouragement in this way. And then, girl, you done started the camera wars in the chat. They like Nikon, Canon, Olympus. I love it though, because like you said, it's truly like the camera doesn't matter as much as the photographer. It's all about
Yeah,
it. Because we could have the same exact gear, the same exact kit. We can go to the same exact location, and we're gonna see it differently and figure out something differently, and which then
absolutely.
right, like just produce a different product. So
And even Martine, like that beautiful image where she said her flashes didn't all fire. That was an accident.
and that was a
So
gorgeous
there's
photo.
things like that. Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, and so it's a combination of like what happy accidents come to you. Where do you put yourself? What is your eye? What is your relationship with the people? Are they inviting you in? Um, there's just so much to it. So
Yeah.
much to it. Yeah.
So to wrap up, I just want to leave on a really good note. Like, what is bringing you? What joy is Joy getting these days?
Oh my gosh. I'm excited for the summer. I'm excited for things to kind of slow down so I can reevaluate things because, like, you showed that project for Reuters. It literally just came out on Mother's Day. And so I've been working on that for the past year and a half. Um,
About a year and a half.
Year and a half. Yeah, there was a lot of just energy, some stress, some excitement, but just a lot of energy that went into bringing that to fruition. So now I'm on the other side and I'm like, okay, A, what do I want to shoot again? B, like I said, I'm thinking about upgrading my camera. So I'm going to put some time and energy into that. Also going to put time and energy into my daughters because when I'm working hard, they do have to kind of like sit and be silent or wait for mom. And so
Yeah.
I'm gonna pour into them, into their lessons and their development. Um, I love reading, so I have or my podcast, so I'm constantly listening to books or information.
Same.
Um, yeah, I use LinkedIn Learning to, trying to stay current with things and just kind of enjoy this time. The semester ended like a week and a half ago. So just enjoying things kind of releasing from my plate so that I can just be in this light place for a moment.
Yes, I love that for you. That's a perfect way to wrap. But guys, please don't go anywhere because we'll be right back. We want to make sure Joy can leave here with a little breath of fresh air, but we're going to come back and just give some little closing notes. So I will be right back. And while I'm gone, could y'all just send Joy some love in the chat? Let her know how much you enjoyed this conversation. Also, send some love to her and any other speaker on Twitter or IG stories. Just use the hashtag BWP Summit so we can find you and repost. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, Joy. I'm so, so grateful. And we'll see you guys in just a second. Give us 5.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.